This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the GOAT of website platforms for anyone looking to start their own site.
They have demon blood!
So the other day, I was watching The Way of Water, and something hit me.
Look!
I really liked the ideas they were playing with, but I never felt that on the edge of my seat excitement about the story. The kind you usually get from great movies. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that with just a few tiny tweaks, we could actually make this Avatar sequel better, and fix a lot of its issues. So yeah, this video is basically me fixing a movie made by the guy who did Terminator, Titanic, and Alien, so you're welcome to tell me how pretentious you think that is. And I'm not going to do a big disclaimer because I think we all get that making a movie is 1,000 times harder than throwing out suggestions from your couch.
That would be me.
But hey, it's a fun way to spice up a video essay and get us thinking about what Avatar could have been. So, to set the stage, I'm going to briefly recap the first act for anyone who might not remember it, because this is where the key lies. And I want you to pay close attention to just how much information gets revealed.
The forests of Pandora hold many dangers.
The movie starts with a 9-minute voiceover from Jake Sully, where he basically recaps what happened since the last film,
Before I knew it, we had 4.
sharing how he ended up with each one of his kids,
The beat when we adopted our daughter, Kitty, a daughter whose conception was a total mystery.
This is how they ended up forming a prototypical family that, if they weren't blue, could be living right next door to you, along with Spider,
Orphaned by the war, he was raised by the lab guys.
an orphan who was raised among the Na'vi like some kind of Tarzan.
Hey, that's enough!
Following that,
Don't make me come over there.
Jake continues to describe how they grew up as a traditional family until during a romantic getaway,
A new star in the night.
they discover that Earth ships are returning,
It could only mean one thing.
bringing their characteristic destruction. So at around 9 minutes in, the voiceover stops, a year passes, then we slowly see eyes opening from a subjective shot, and it turns out it's an avatar in a lab. We soon figure out that this avatar was created using the memories of Colonel Miles.
Since you haven't figured it out yet, you're Colonel Miles Quaritch.
As he's discovering his new body, we see the new Colonel watching a video the old Colonel recorded before his last battle, where he says,
And if you are watching it, well, it means that I did get my ticket punched.
and then instructs the new Colonel to get revenge.
If you're any clone of mine, you'll be looking for some payback. And Jake Sully would be at the top of that list.
14 minutes into the movie, and we've already learned 3 big things. Humans kept creating avatars. Avatars can be made by copying someone's memories, meaning people can be brought back to life, and Colonel Miles was resurrected using this method. But let me keep going. After that, we get a few more war scenes, and at the end of the battle, they introduce the Doctor using the same method they used for Miles.
I'm seeing real evidence of a systemic response on a global level.
Then we find out that Spider, who's easily the most interesting character in the whole movie, is actually Miles' son.
You are not him.
On the other hand, the blue military squad heads to this massive human-built structure, which highlights just how deeply entrenched they are in their invasion of the planet. We get that it's like this because, as they say,
Earth is dying. Our task here is to tame this frontier.
another very important revelation.
Nothing less than to make Pandora the new home for humanity.
This time at the 23-minute mark. Once this premise is established, Miles' team confirms that Pandora's ecosystem doesn't recognize them as hostile beings. And this is where the narrative moment that interests me begins. While the soldiers venture into the dense jungle of Pandora, we simultaneously see Jake's kids, along with Spider, playing in a very similar area. The two storylines, let's call them Plot A and Plot B, begin to converge. The scenes alternate between kids playing and soldiers exploring until one of the kids discovers a giant footprint,
It's way too big for human. Avatars?
prompting Spider to start tracking it. Meanwhile, the soldiers arrive at the base where Jake used to rest his body and where the Colonel died. They even find the arrows still stuck in his now heavily decomposed body. At this point, we realize the kids have found the soldiers.
Bro, that's where your dad and my dad fought.
They see them from afar and warn Jake. But it's too late because they get caught. By this time,
What's your name, kid?
Spider? Socorro.
Miles notices Spider and realizes he's his son.
Miles?
As they wait for a ship, Spider watches Miles replay the video of his death, leading to a striking moment where Miles crushes his own skull in a rather interesting gesture that I want you to remember. The sequence ends with Jake and Nightery showing up at night, and she is the first to realize the new avatar is actually the Colonel.
That you, Mrs. Sully? I recognize your calling card.
Finally, they manage to save their kids but can't stop Miles from taking Spider onto the ship.
Look, I got nothing. I got no plan.
Moving on from this first act,
But I can protect this family. That I can do.
Jake and Nightery decide to leave the island because they're being hunted.
Where is Jake Sully?
I don't know!
Then Spider gets tortured for information and strikes a deal with the Colonel.
I'm not that man. But I do have his memories.
Who tells him that while he's not technically his father, he wants to help him.
I can help you. I can get you out of here.
To wrap up, the protagonists leave the tribe and head to what feels like a Caribbean resort on Pandora, concluding this portion of the story at the 50-minute mark. And I bring this up because it highlights the ridiculous amount of information dumped in the first act, which ties back to why I found the movie so boring. It lacks that sense of mystery or suspense that keeps you on the edge of your seat. I think it's partly because we're bombarded with so much information right from the start. So the question is, what if we reordered and spread out that information throughout the movie to build the kind of mystery we've been talking about? Well, let's try to do it in this not at all pretentious essay. Let me put it this way. There's a choice in the movie that I think really hurts the whole experience.
Get that out of his face.
Colonel, you hear me?
It's the scene where, after 9 minutes of intro, the Colonel wakes up in a new avatar body. And the problem starts right from the first shot, a POV from the Colonel that puts us in his head. This whole sequence gives away too much info and locks us into his perspective. And because of this, we lose that sense of mystery and tension. Everything on the human side, that is, plot B, is explained step by step, leaving no room for suspense. Now, imagine if we cut this scene and saved those key pieces of information for later. We wouldn't know they're still making avatars. We wouldn't know they can revive someone through memories, and we wouldn't know the Colonel is still alive. We'd be totally in the dark about what's happening with the humans, just focused on Pandora and the Sully family, and their life in the Resistance, which, though tough, they're managing well and are generally happy. But before we keep going with the essay,
Okay.
I want to share something with you, since, you know, I get a lot of questions about the process behind my videos, like where I find ideas or how I learned what I know. Well, the answer is pretty complex, so I've been working on a page to explain some of the steps behind each project. And since I don't know anything about coding or web design, today's sponsor has been a huge help, and I'm talking about Squarespace. In these early steps, one thing that completely changed my process was the intelligent design feature, an AI-powered suite built to help you design better and boost your creativity. The truth is, it's fast, intuitive, and helps you get exactly what you want in a unique, non-generic way, and this is just one of the many visual design tools Squarespace offers to help you create a site perfectly aligned with your brand's style and goals. And for someone who really cares about aesthetics, it's a relief to have an interface that offers so much control. Plus, it has other features like building an online store, or one that I think is awesome, uploading videos. So maybe one day I'll also upload my videos there and share a bit of the process behind them. So if this sounds like a fit for you, check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when your site is ready, go to squarespace.com/Lancelotti to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now let's go back to the video. In this version, we keep Dr. Grace in the story, but hold back on revealing that Spider is the Colonel's son. Instead, we keep the conversation between Jake's kids about their parents, leaving a question hanging in the air. Why doesn't this kid have parents? We might suspect one of his parents is a doctor or soldier, but not necessarily the Colonel, and since he's not relevant at this moment, we can also skip the scene where they casually mention Earth is dying, and that Pandora might become a new home for humans. This is huge news, but the movie treats it like an afterthought, and without proper build-up, it doesn't carry the weight it should. But this is actually critical information, because it means the human invasion is going to be much more intense. It's not just about greed, or resources, like in the first movie, it's about survival. And it's a shame the movie treats it like an excuse for a counterattack, rather than something that could have deep dramatic weight for all the characters. In summary, we wouldn't know that Earth is dying either, and we wouldn't see the military arriving on Pandora. Instead, in this version, we continue with the kids playing in the jungle, in a cheerful, carefree atmosphere, like the calm after the storm of the battle we saw just minutes before. The only thing that stands out is the presence of old, rusted shipwrecks, leftovers from the first war between the Na'vi and humans. Suddenly, just as we're settling into this scene, the light-hearted vibe is interrupted by a disturbing find. One of the kids spots a giant footprint,
Way too big for a human. Avatars? Maybe.
raising the question, who does it belong to? They start to worry, and so do we. Because if it's not human and doesn't seem to be one of theirs, it's a warning sign. Unable to leave without answers, they begin to track it, and the tension builds as they go. The trail leads them to a familiar spot, the site of the last battle between Miles and Sully. In that eerie graveyard, they first hear footsteps and then spot in the distance a group of militarized avatars. And this is a major twist, as it's the first time we see avatars being used as weapons. It's worth noting that so far, we've been experiencing everything from the kids' perspective, only knowing what they know. The soldiers are unfamiliar, but there's one who seems to be in charge and clearly has more power than the others. So we'll call him the leader. Once we focus on him, he observes the remains of what we know are the defeated remnants of what was once Colonel Miles. Now, for the first time, we explicitly remember him, which plants the first hint of what's to come. Anyway, the leader fixes his gaze on the arrows with a look of disdain. Then he grabs the skull in his hand and crushes it with force. We don't really know why he does these two things. At first glance, they don't seem to add much to the story. They become more intriguing. Why does he look at the arrows with disdain? Is it anger over a fallen comrade? Wounded pride from humanity's loss? Disgust for the Na'vi's primitive ways? Or disbelief that a machine could be beaten by sticks and stones? Maybe he's even looking at the weapon that killed him. Without knowing he's the Colonel, that last thought wouldn't cross our minds, but the others might. The same goes for when he crushes the skull, and by cutting out plot B, these clues would have more interpretations. That's why it would have a bigger impact when we later find out this guy is the Colonel. In our cut of Avatar 2, the image of him crushing the skull would just make us think he's a ruthless leader replacing the old one, and we could see it as a gesture of contempt for the Colonel's failure, setting up an even tougher new leader and making for a strong character introduction.
They look like avatars, but they're in full camo and carrying ARs.
At this point, the story should proceed as before.
What's your pause? Over.
Jake's kids alert him about what they've seen and try to retreat, but they're captured by the unknown soldiers.
Put it down, I'll shoot you! With me.
Then, the soldiers notice that the Na'vi are hybrids because of their fingers,
4 fingers.
hinting that they're Jake's kids. It's worth noting that if we get into the details, the leader should speak very little here, for reasons I'll explain later, but it's clear he's the one in charge. While they wait for the ship to arrive, he focuses on Spider, and one of the soldiers asks for his name. Of course, instead of saying his last name, he would just say Miles to avoid revealing to the audience that he is the Colonel's son. Anyway, the point here is that the reaction to hearing the name is emphasized, but not much else is revealed. There's a hint of something, but we don't know what. At that moment, before Jake arrives, the leader revisits the Colonel's body. First, he watches the video of the Colonel's death, and then he takes the Colonel's dog towel for reasons that remain unclear. But this video is crucial because it foreshadows the Colonel's presence, ensuring that his return doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere. When Jake and Neytiri arrive, the scene plays out just like in the movie, except Neytiri never learns that the leader is actually Colonel Miles. The couple manages to rescue their kids, but for some reason, the leader decides to take Spider, maybe to get information from him or simply because taking one is better than taking none. And this is pivotal because Spider becomes our narrative device, serving as our entry point into the human world. Now, we see everything through his eyes, rather than through an all-knowing narrator, which, in my opinion, diminishes the mystery in the movie. It's about using an element from plot A as our observer for plot B. On the other hand, Jake and Neytiri still don't know they're actually up against the Colonel, and neither do we. We're going to keep this under wraps to emphasize how it impacts Jake, something the movie glosses over, as they don't even show when he finds out.
You cannot ask this. I cannot leave my people. I will not.
He's hunting us.
We just assumed that at some point off-screen, between the battle and the conversation scene, Neytiri told him, which is a missed opportunity because we don't get to see his reaction. Now, this is going to be a crucial element to work on, the revelation of the Colonel as the leader of the military avatars. And we'll break this reveal into two parts. First, to the audience, and later, to Jake. This way, we can add an extra layer of suspense. The reveal to the audience will be gradual, through small hints, so by the time it's explicitly confirmed, a good portion of the viewers will have already suspected it. Structurally speaking, we could establish it as the midpoint of the film. On the other hand, Jake's discovery will be sudden later in the plot, because what matters is how this revelation impacts him and the implications it carries. This way, once we know that the Avatar is the Colonel, since it's information that has been built up with a lot of anticipation, we'll understand its significance and give it the weight it deserves. And with that in mind, the dramatic tension will steadily increase. Because we'll be on the edge of our seats waiting to see how Jake reacts to the fact that the leader causing them so much trouble is actually a ghost from his past. We're playing with dramatic irony here, where the audience knows something crucial that the character doesn't, which creates tension as we see everything unfold. Kind of like knowing the Titanic is going to sink while the characters have no idea. And to really pull this off and keep the audience by the short and curlies, we need to build the reveal properly, which is divided into two parts. First, that Spider is the Colonel's son, and second, that the leader is created from the Colonel's memories. The first reveal is straightforward, but the second one is trickier because it could come off as a bit far-fetched. So to get a sense of how we could fix it, let's go over the scenes from Plot B, the ones with Spider and the Colonel.
I don't know!
After Spider is tortured for information, the Colonel steps in and suggests another approach.
General, let me try the personal angle.
Later, in a private chat,
I thought you might want this.
he gives Spider the Colonel's dog tag and explains that he's not that man, just a collection of his memories.
Technically, you and I, we're nothing to each other.
Then once they reach an agreement and return to Pandora, the Colonel reminds Spider that his mask has a tracker,
There's a tracker built in that mask.
which leads to the jungle scene where Miles tells his team they need to act like Na'vi to track Jake.
We go Na'vi. Full tilt all the way.
This is followed by a moment where Spider, clearly impressed, smiles at the Colonel for the first time. By this point, we are practically halfway through the movie.
Not. Alright, like coming out your nose or something.
Spider is teaching the Colonel how to pronounce Na'vi words when they get a lead on Jake Sully's location, in a tender and rushed father-son scene.
Where?
Eastern Sea, 400 clicks north.
Which finally triggers their search. Now, let's consider how we could rework these 6 scenes so that neither Spider nor the audience knows he's the Colonel's son, gradually building suspense around these revelations by transforming what the film currently treats as merely informative scenes into pivotal dramatic moments. Let's start with the kidnapping scene, for example. In our version, just like in the original, the Colonel realizes Spider is his son based on his name, since there's no way another human with that name would be on Pandora. But in our cut, neither Spider nor we as the audience would know this information, so when he's kidnapped, we'd just assume it's to extract information from him. The interesting twist here is that, although Spider doesn't know the Colonel is his father, Jake and the others likely do. This adds an extra layer of depth. Since they chose to let Spider believe he was an orphan with unknown parents, rather than tell him the truth, possibly because of the taboo it represented. When Spider eventually discovers his life has been built on a lie, it could create a deep internal conflict, potentially leading him to consider turning to the dark side. On the other hand, in the second act, the interaction with what we currently know as the leader could begin with him ordering a more personal meeting with Spider after the torture. And of course, in this version, the leader should be kept in the shadows, as a distant and mysterious figure of few words, because this version is about gradually closing the distance with him. Once they're face to face in the room, the leader would be an imposing presence, with his voice slightly muffled by a mask needed to breathe Earth's atmosphere. This, of course, is a filmmaking tool to avoid revealing the leader's voice too clearly, as it could make his identity too obvious. In their exchange, Spider might taunt him to fight like a real person if he has the guts, thinking avatars are controlled remotely, because that's all we know at this point, and the leader could then hint that he no longer has a human body, raising a key question for later. How do the avatars function without one? The leader's reason for revealing this could vary, maybe to build trust, which is common in interrogations, or because part of him wants his son to understand, a hint from the movie. But honestly, my focus isn't on the exact dialogues, but on how the information should be structured in the plot. Anyway, as the conversation continues, the leader might mention the boy's loyalty and strength, hinting at his father, leading him to ask if the leader knows who his father is, and the leader could imply that he knows his father very well, using this as leverage to gain trust. He might even suggest that if Spider cooperates, he'll reveal more about his father. As you can see, we're hinting at part of the reveal from Plot B, that Spider is the Colonel's son. But the second part, that the leader is created from the Colonel's memories, might seem a bit far-fetched, and the movie tries to explain it with a simple video from the Colonel, but while it works, it feels a bit clumsy. So instead of going that route, let's try something different. What I'm thinking is that to avoid dumping all the information in Plot B, we can sprinkle some hints in Plot A. For example, we need to subtly introduce the idea that memories can be reused, since it's crucial information that shouldn't just come out of nowhere, and we could do this in several ways. One approach might be having a doctor tell Kiri, who might be missing her mom since she's now physically far away, that if she wants to talk to her, they could explore a way to bring her mother's cloned memories back to life. Of course, the doctor might say it's uncertain, mentioning early stage projects and that there's a chance it could work, leaving us hanging with just the right amount of suspense. But this would make sense considering Dr. Grace was a scientist who experimented on her own body. Naturally, Kiri would refuse, saying something like, "No way, Pandora wants her to stay asleep," or some other hippie argument. Still, it would help introduce the idea, making the revelation about memory reuse feel more natural and less sudden. Now, going back to Spider and the leader, we could rearrange a few scenes. After showing Jake and his family at the retreat, we'd jump to the scene where the Colonel warns Spider not to escape, but instead of doing it himself, the second in command would handle it to keep the leader in the shadows. This would lead to the scene where the leader bonds with the creature, earning Spider's respect, followed by a relaxed conversation where Spider asks about his father. This is where the leader would give Spider the Colonel's medal, telling him it belonged to his father, who died in battle at the hands of Jake Sully. And of course, Spider would be shocked, and the leader would start planting seeds of doubt in his mind. Why didn't Jake ever tell him who his father was? This could be the moment that nudges him toward the dark side, or, makes him seriously question everything.
This little vial here is worth like 80 million. Think fast.
As the story progresses, Spider would eventually discover that the whale hunting is for extracting valuable genetic material. The argument would start with Spider accusing the military of doing all this just for profit, like a young environmentalist against oil companies. In response, either out of frustration at being misunderstood or as a form of manipulation, the leader would say it's not about wealth, but about revenge. This could be the moment when the leader starts telling the story from his perspective, explaining why he sees Jake as a traitor. After a dramatic pause, he might say that he knows it firsthand, circling back to Spider's initial question about how he functions without a human body. There he would explain that he and the rest of the squad operate based on the memories of soldiers who fell at Jake Sully's hands. The dialogue would be obviously expository, but with the right atmosphere, it could be overlooked almost in a classic "I'm your father" style. Eventually, he would reveal that the reason he knows Spider's father so well is because he was created from his memories. Of course, it's not an ideal solution, but playing the role of editor and producer with a limited budget for reshoots, a well-delivered monologue, like Apocalypse Now, but blue, could be a quick fix. However, this isn't a video about dialogue, but rather about structure, so don't pay too much attention to that aspect. Besides, it's not like the dialogues in Avatar are exactly Shakespearean.
I got no plan, but I can protect this family. That I can do.
By this point, the audience will have put 2 and 2 together with things they probably suspected earlier. Moreover, for Spider, the shock would be even greater. Not only does he learn who his father is, but he realizes he's standing right in front of him. And this is where we could really explore the duality in his emotions, going from being an orphan with no last name to having a real father figure. Of course, some viewers might be shocked, while others might think it was obvious. But the tension of this reveal would add weight to the scene because of the emotional impact it has on Spider, who is the protagonist of Plot B and our eyes into this story. Now the relationship between Spider and the Colonel would take on new meaning. The Colonel's interest in keeping Spider close would make more sense, and the tension would build as Jake learns the truth. If this scene happens midway through the movie, we should keep that tension going into the third act. Once again, the tension would build around how Plot A connects with Plot B. Meanwhile, we've been watching Jake and the kids playing with the whales in Plot A. But once Jake is ready for war, he should confront the Colonel's fleet with his team, setting up the final battle, just like in the movie. And this is where Jake would make the discovery. Maybe through a conversation, hearing the Colonel's voice over a loudspeaker or communicator, or a cliche where the Colonel calls him by name and references the past. But the point is that Jake would realize that the leader is Colonel Miles. And the key moment here is Jake's reaction, likely one of terror. Let me put it this way. He goes into the battle tense, but confident, only to discover that the man holding his children hostage isn't just any soldier. It's his former superior, the one he betrayed and caused the death of, and 1,000 thoughts would race through his mind. First, the military now has a massive advantage with avatars that don't need bodies, making them almost immortal. Second, this isn't just a war. It's personal revenge. And worst of all, the Colonel is like a curse. No matter how many times he's killed, he can come back, like a demon seeking eternal revenge. I believe the climax would be much more powerful if it started with this revelation, as Jake's mindset would be completely different. We could see the same scenes, but with a different subtext. With the revelation fresh, moments like Neytiri threatening Spider, one of the best in the movie, would be even more intense as Jake and Neytiri would be more unsettled and unsure of Spider's loyalty while still processing the news. And by the time we get to the climax, I'd keep the final piece of information as the cherry on top. During the big fight, the Colonel could drop the bombshell that it doesn't matter if they win this time or the next, because Earth is dying, and they're going to keep coming back. So it's not about getting rich anymore, or even revenge. It's about saving humanity. And that's pretty unsettling because if it was already tough to beat the humans under normal circumstances, it's way harder to defeat them when they're fighting for survival. And it means the humans will keep coming back, more insistent and aggressive each time, and that Pandora is basically doomed to endless war and destruction. And giving this revelation the right buildup could draw you in even more for the second movie. Yet you'd realize that this installment was setting the stage for what's next, a sequel that unfolds an even larger and epic world.